Olivia's life followed a predictable pattern. Every morning she would get up before the sun, prepare her coffee, and observe the silence of her small house. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It was an almost automatic routine, a reflection of years of loneliness and daily struggles to survive. In a neighborhood where hope seemed like a relic of the past, Olivia had learned to find meaning in small things. For her, the simple fact of being able to get up and fight another day was already a victory. On that particular morning, something different was about to happen, something that would completely change Olivia's life. As always, she went out to collect recyclable materials. This was the work that sustained her, and which, in a way, also kept her busy enough not to think about the emotional wounds she carried. But while rummaging through the contents of a trash can, a muffled sound caught her attention. It was a low cry, almost imperceptible, but it made Olivia's heart race. She approached slowly, trying to identify the source of the sound. When she pushed aside a dirty and worn blanket, her gaze met a baby, small and helpless, wrapped in those sad conditions. The initial shock almost made her drop the blanket. Who would leave a baby there, amidst the garbage, with no one to care for it? With trembling hands, Olivia picked up the girl and noticed that there was a note tied to the blanket. Her hands, marked by years of hard work, carefully unfolded the paper. "My name is Sophia, and this is my daughter, Leah. I am seriously ill and have no one to take care of her. Please give her a better life." Each word of the note seemed to weigh tons. Olivia stood motionless, feeling a mixture of sadness, anger, and compassion. She, who knew abandonment and loneliness so well, felt something awaken within her. What would she do now? Leaving the child there was out of the question. But could she, an elderly woman with few resources, be able to care for a baby? That moment stretched for long minutes as Olivia pondered all the implications of her decision. But looking again into the innocent and frightened eyes of the girl, she knew she could not turn her back. With little Leah in her arms, Olivia returned home. With each step, she felt the weight of responsibility grow. At the same time, a strange sense of purpose invaded her. Maybe, she thought, this was destiny giving her a second chance, an opportunity to heal the wounds of the past. Back in her modest home, Olivia found herself moving with a new sense of urgency. Leah needed a bath, clean clothes, and, above all, love and care. That child was now part of her life, and she would do whatever was necessary to protect her. As she prepared an improvised bath with water she drew from the well, Olivia reflected on how life could change so unexpectedly. She, who had spent years alone, now had a little companion who depended entirely on her. Olivia's thoughts wandered to the challenges that would come next. How would she explain Leah's presence to the neighbors? How would she manage to meet the needs of a growing child? And what would happen if the authorities discovered the situation? There were many doubts, but when she saw Leah smile for the first time, a shy and soft smile, all uncertainties dissipated. Olivia decided at that moment that she would do everything possible and impossible to ensure Leah's well-being. The following weeks were a trial by fire for Olivia. With each new day, she faced unexpected challenges as she tried to adapt her life to accommodate Leah. From finding ways to improvise diapers to preparing suitable food for such a small child, everything was a constant learning experience. However, the biggest challenge was not material, but emotional. Leah's presence awakened in Olivia feelings that she believed she had lost long ago: tenderness, affection, and above all, the feeling of being needed. Leah, in turn, seemed to recognize that she was in good hands. Even with the adaptation to the new routine, the girl rarely cried. Her eyes followed Olivia around every corner of the house, as if she wanted to absorb every detail of that new environment. During the nights, Olivia often found herself awake, watching Leah sleep. It was a moment of peace, where the weight of the world seemed to dissipate for a few moments. However, not everything was tranquility. The small community where Olivia lived was known for its curious and sometimes intrusive residents. It didn't take long for neighbors to start commenting on the child, who was now part of Olivia's life. Whispers and suspicious looks became frequent, especially when Olivia went out with Leah for her routine recyclable collections. For many, It was difficult to understand how an elderly and lonely woman could be caring for such a small child. Some were genuinely concerned, while others saw it as another opportunity for gossip. But Olivia was not shaken. She knew that the love she felt for Leah was stronger than any judgment. Each smile from the girl, each babbled word, fueled the flame of determination within Olivia. The bond between the two grew every day, becoming a true mother-daughter relationship, built not by blood, but by love and the mutual need to have someone. Over time, Leah's needs began to increase, and Olivia had to think of creative solutions to supply what was lacking. One of the neighbors, who had children, began to offer clothes and toys that her own children no longer used. These small gestures of kindness were a relief to Olivia, who, despite financial difficulties, refused to ask for help. Meanwhile, Olivia's house, which once seemed so empty, was now full of life. Improvised toys were scattered on the floor, and the sound of Leah's laughter echoed through the rooms. Olivia's routine changed drastically, but she didn't mind. For her, every moment beside Leah was an opportunity to rediscover herself, to heal the wounds of the past, and to finally find a purpose that motivated her to keep fighting. The days began to turn into weeks, and Olivia realized that she was not just taking care of Leah, she was also being transformed by this experience. The strength and resilience she had always had were now directed towards a greater goal, providing Leah with a life full of love, security, and opportunities. Even with the difficulties and daily challenges, Olivia had never been so certain that she was on the right path. Olivia always had a complex relationship with the past. Raised in a humble family, she learned early on that life would not be easy. Her parents, rural workers, always did their best to ensure that she and her sister, Carolina, had the bare minimum. But the minimum was exactly that, just enough to survive. The early years of Olivia's childhood were marked by deprivation and sacrifices, but also by a love that transcended material difficulties. Olivia's parents were people of great dignity, who taught her and her sister the value of work and honesty. Despite the lack of resources, there was always a sense of unity in the family, a certainty that, as long as they were together, they could overcome any obstacle. But life had its own plans. When Carolina was born, Olivia was only 15 years old, and suddenly went from being a daughter to a kind of second mother. Her mother had a complicated pregnancy, and the weight of taking care of the house and the newborn sister fell on her shoulders. Carolina's birth brought a drastic change in the family dynamics. Olivia's parents were already older and tired, without the same energy to raise a small child. This caused Olivia to take on much of the responsibility, sacrificing her youth and her own dreams. While other girls her age were concerned with studies and friendships, Olivia was taking care of a house and a sister who gradually became the center of attention. As the years passed, Carolina grew up in an environment where the family's financial conditions had improved a bit. The hard work of the parents finally began to bear fruit, and Carolina was able to enjoy opportunities that Olivia never had. This generated a silent resentment between the two. Carolina, even without wanting to, represented to Olivia everything she had lost, and Carolina, in turn, never understood the difficulties that Olivia faced to ensure she had a better childhood. This resentment grew over time, although the sisters never spoke openly about it. While Olivia dedicated herself to work, Carolina became a young woman full of dreams and ambitions. She wanted to live a life that went beyond the limits of the neighborhood where they grew up, and her determination to achieve her goals distanced her even more from her sister. In Olivia's eyes, Carolina was ungrateful, unable to see the sacrifices made by her and their parents. But in reality, Carolina was just seeking something more, something she felt was beyond the reach of the life she knew. Over time, the sisters' lives took different paths. Olivia, despite her broken dreams, found satisfaction in hard work and the commitment to take care of the family. She met Raphael, a young man with whom she quickly identified. Both shared the same simple vision of life: to work, build a family, and, if possible, find some kind of happiness in the midst of it all. Raphael seemed to be everything Olivia had always wanted in a partner. He was attentive, hardworking, and above all, understood the difficulties she had been through. The first years of marriage were good, but the desire to have children soon became a source of tension between them. Olivia became pregnant shortly after they married, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. She prepared the house with great care, making small toys with recycled materials and planning every detail for the baby's arrival. But happiness was tragically interrupted when Olivia suffered a domestic accident that resulted in the loss of the baby. The pain was devastating, and grief put a barrier between her and Raphael. Raphael, who had always wanted a child, began to distance himself emotionally. He blamed Olivia for what had happened, although he knew it wasn't fair. But the frustrated desire to have an heir made him become bitter and distant. Olivia, in turn, immersed herself even more in work and daily routine, trying to ignore the growing emptiness within her. Meanwhile, Carolina was living her own drama. Married to a violent and abusive man, she often resorted to Olivia's house for refuge. These visits, however, were a mixture of relief and tension. Carolina, always with a rebellious and defiant posture, brought with her the emotional chaos that accumulated in her marriage. And Raphael, noticing Carolina's vulnerability, began to approach her in a way that exceeded the limits of decency. One day, while returning home after a long day of work, Olivia noticed something strange in Raphael and Carolina's behavior. They seemed closer than normal, exchanging furtive glances and whispers that left her uncomfortable. But, busy with her own concerns, Olivia ignored the signs, attributing everything to her own paranoia. However, the discomfort did not disappear. That same night, as she went out to collect recyclable materials, Olivia decided to return earlier than usual. Upon arriving home, she heard voices in the living room, voices that shouldn't be there. As she approached, she realized that Raphael and Carolina were having a conversation that would change her life forever. They were discussing the possibility of being together, away from Olivia, planning a life where they could finally be free from appearances and lies. The worst part was when Carolina, in a cold and calculating tone, revealed that she was pregnant with Raphael's child. The shock and pain that Olivia felt at that moment were indescribable. The betrayal came not only from her husband, but from the sister she had raised and protected. Amidst the revelation, Olivia entered the room, unable to contain the pain and fury that consumed her. Carolina and Raphael froze upon seeing her, but there was no longer any way to hide what was happening. Carolina, without any trace of remorse, challenged Olivia with an arrogant look. "He always wanted a child, Olivia. I just gave him what you could never give," Carolina said with a cruel smile. Raphael, on the other hand, tried to justify his actions. "I just wanted what any man desires, a child. I never wanted things to come to this point, but you left me with no choice," he said, trying to dodge the blame. But Olivia knew those words were empty. The man she once loved was willing to destroy her to satisfy his own selfish desires. The pain of betrayal was accompanied by a feeling of powerlessness. Olivia felt that everything she had fought for was crumbling before her eyes. The only thing that kept her standing was the memory of Leah. At that moment, she made the decision that she would not allow Raphael and Carolina's poison to contaminate the child's life. She would leave the past behind and focus on taking care of Leah, even if it meant giving up everything she had built alongside Raphael. The days that followed were of complete distancing. Raphael and Carolina continued with their plans, making it clear that they did not intend to include Olivia in their new lives. The atmosphere in the house became unbearable, and Olivia knew that the only solution would be to leave that toxic environment. Determined to free herself, Olivia initiated the divorce process and distanced herself from Carolina. The bitter memories of betrayal haunted her, but she knew that her priority was to protect Leah and ensure that the girl grew up in a healthy environment, free from the lies and manipulations that surrounded her. The wound of betrayal still hurt, but in her heart, Olivia found the strength to move forward and seek a new beginning alongside Leah. After the painful separation and cutting ties with her sister, Olivia knew she needed to reinvent herself. Now more than ever, Leah became the center of her life. That girl, who was only months old when she was found, was now almost 2 years old. With each new day, Olivia saw in Leah a renewed source of energy, hope, and love. The child's small gestures, the way she held Olivia's hand as they walked the streets, The looks full of curiosity and the carefree laughter made Olivia feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Even with her heart still marked by Raphael and Carolina's betrayal, Olivia found strength to move forward. She decided that she would not allow past events to define her. On the contrary, she would use all the pain as fuel to build a new life, both for herself and for Leah. The daily routine, which before seemed heavy and repetitive, gained a new purpose. Tasks that were once done out of necessity were now carried out with the desire to create a welcoming and safe environment for Leah. The house, which once seemed cold and empty, was now filled with the sound of improvised toys, children's songs, and the contagious laughter of the girl. However, challenges continued to be present. Although Olivia was determined to take care of Leah, financial limitations were a constant reality. The money from collecting recyclables and crafts was not enough to meet all needs. In many moments, Olivia found herself having to choose between buying food or essential items for Leah, such as clothes and diapers. But despite the difficulties, she never thought of giving up. On the contrary, each challenge made her reaffirm her commitment to give the best to Leah. Little by little, the girl's presence also began to impact the surrounding community. The neighborhood, previously full of people who only cared about their own lives, began to notice Olivia's dedication to the child. Some neighbors, who in the past were critical or indifferent, began to offer help, even if discreetly. One of them, Donacita, a lady who lived 2 houses away, started leaving packages of powdered milk and cookies at Olivia's door during the early hours. Other neighbors began to set aside used clothes and toys for Leah. These small acts of kindness warmed Olivia's heart, who always made a point of thanking personally, although she knew that many of them preferred to remain anonymous. As time passed, Olivia realized that Leah was a special child. Even so young, the girl demonstrated an unusual sensitivity. Leah seemed to perceive when Olivia was sad or worried, approaching her with an affection that transcended her age. These moments made Olivia reflect on the transformative power of love. She, who for so long felt alone and hopeless, now found in Leah the strength necessary to continue. Moreover, the relationship between the two became increasingly stronger. Olivia dedicated hours of her day to teaching Leah to speak, to recognize colors and shapes, and to be enchanted by the small things in life, like the shine of the sun on the leaves of trees, or the sound of the wind on summer afternoons. The simplicity of these moments, far from being banal, was what filled their hearts. The genuine love that developed between the two was the foundation of a new life, a life built not on material wealth, but on the richness of affection and care. However, even with the strong bond and constant progress, Olivia knew that there were practical issues that needed to be resolved. Leah was still not officially registered in her name, and this worried her. She feared that, at any moment, someone could question her ability to care for the child or, worse, try to take Leah away. The informal situation in which they lived was a constant weight on her mind, and she knew she needed to find a solution. Despite the fears, Olivia kept her head held high. Each day, she dedicated herself to building a routine that was healthy and happy for Leah. They went out together every morning to collect recyclable materials, and Olivia made a point of turning this activity into a kind of educational game. Leah, in her childish innocence, had fun helping her mother separate bottles and cans, and they always ended the day with a smile on their face. The simplicity of these moments was what gave meaning to Olivia's life. And so, even amid difficulties, Olivia continued to walk with determination. She knew that the journey was far from easy, but she also knew that she wasn't alone. Leah, with her smile and illuminated presence, was proof that true love can arise in the most unexpected circumstances, and Olivia was willing to fight with all her strength to ensure that this love prevailed. 5 years had passed since Olivia found Leah on that fateful day. The girl, who was once just a baby, was now growing rapidly. Leah was a curious child, full of energy, always in search of new discoveries. Each day beside her was a new adventure for Olivia. The routine, although exhausting, had become a source of joy and purpose. However, the tranquility that Olivia had built was about to be shaken. On a morning like any other, as Olivia prepared for another day of work, a luxurious car stopped in front of her house. The shine of the vehicle contrasted with the simplicity of the neighborhood, and soon the neighbors began to peek through the windows, curious to know what was happening. Olivia, upon hearing the sound of the engine, was overcome by a strange presentiment. Something inside her said that this unexpected visitor would bring changes. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out of the car with a posture that conveyed authority and confidence. He walked to the door of Olivia's house and knocked softly, waiting for her to answer. When Olivia opened the door, she was greeted by a polite smile, but one that hid a mixture of anxiety and hope. "Good morning. My name is Eduardo. I'm sorry to appear like this out of the blue, but I need to talk to you about something very important," he said, with a voice that denoted both firmness and caution. Olivia, intrigued and somewhat distrustful, motioned for him to enter. Eduardo thanked her and settled into the modest living room, while Olivia tried to understand the reason for that visit. The man took a deep breath before continuing. "I know it may seem strange, but I'm looking for my granddaughter. Recently, I discovered that my son, Hugo, had a daughter with a woman named Sophia. I spent years trying to find her and finally managed to get here." Shock ran through Olivia's body. For years, she had prepared herself for the moment when someone might appear to claim Leah, but she never imagined it would actually happen. Her heart raced, and for a moment, all she could think about was how to protect the girl. But Eduardo seemed to perceive the tension in the air and quickly tried to calm Olivia. "I didn't come here to take the child away from you. I understand that you were the one who took care of her all these years, and I'm deeply grateful for that. But Leah is my granddaughter, and I would like to meet her, to be part of her life." Eduardo's words, although charged with emotion, did not diminish Olivia's fear. The prospect of losing Leah, or having to share the responsibility of raising her with someone she barely knew, was terrifying. The girl was all she had, and the idea that someone could enter their lives and destabilize what they had built was difficult to accept. "She is my daughter, Eduardo. She may not be by blood, but she is my daughter by heart. I don't know what you expect, but I won't allow anyone to take her away from me," Olivia replied with a firm voice, but visibly shaken. Eduardo sighed, understanding Olivia's reaction. He knew it wouldn't be easy to gain that woman's trust, but he was determined to try. "I understand your concern, Olivia. Really. I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you to hear all this, but I'm here to try to do things the right way. I didn't know about Leah's existence until recently, and my son, Hugo, also didn't know how to handle the situation. He's not prepared to take on this responsibility, but I am. I just want to meet my granddaughter and ensure that she has everything she needs." Olivia remained silent for a few moments, absorbing what Eduardo had said. There was sincerity in his words, but she knew she would need more than promises to trust him. Leah was the reason for her life, and giving up control over the child's upbringing was something Olivia wasn't ready to do. However, she also couldn't deny that Eduardo had the right to meet his granddaughter. Would it be fair to deprive Leah of a connection with her biological family, however uncertain that connection might be? The two spent hours talking, with Eduardo trying to prove that he wasn't there to cause harm. He told about his own life, about how he had lost his wife, and how he had always wanted to have a united family. He talked about Hugo's mistakes and how he hoped, somehow, to make up for his son's lack of commitment by being a present grandfather. Olivia listened to everything carefully, but there was still a barrier between them. She knew she would need time to process all of that and make a decision. Before leaving, Eduardo made one last appeal. "I know it's difficult for you, but all I ask is a chance to prove that I only want what's best for Leah. I'm not here to replace you or interfere in the life you've built. I just want to be around, so she knows she has one more person who loves her." Olivia stood up, showing that the conversation was coming to an end. "I'll think about what you said, Eduardo, but please understand that I will do whatever it takes to protect Leah. She is my priority, and I won't allow anything or anyone to hurt her." With that, Eduardo said goodbye, respecting Olivia's space, but with the hope that that door wasn't completely closed. He knew there was much to prove, but he was willing to fight to get closer to his granddaughter and perhaps find a new meaning for his own life through this connection. After Eduardo's unexpected visit, Olivia's life changed irrevocably. Although she spent days reflecting on what he had said, the fear of losing Leah continued to consume her thoughts. She found herself observing the girl more intensely, fearing that, at any moment, someone might appear and take her away. Every time Leah smiled or ran towards her, Olivia's heart tightened, as if the time with the child was about to be taken from her hands. Eduardo, for his part, proved to be persistent but respectful. He knew that to gain Olivia's trust, he would need to act with patience and understanding. Weeks after the first meeting, he returned to visit them, this time bringing gifts for Leah: books, toys, and clothes. However, Eduardo soon realized that it wasn't material goods that would make a difference. Leah looked at him with curiosity, but always sought the comfort of Olivia's arms. For the girl, that woman was her mother, the only figure she knew as family. Eduardo didn't give up. Instead, he began to frequent the neighborhood more regularly, trying to create opportunities to interact with Leah. He would appear on weekends, offering trips to the park or simply sitting with them on the porch to talk. The interactions were careful, unhurried, like someone trying to rebuild a long-abandoned bridge. Olivia observed everything with caution. There was something about Eduardo that confused her, although his presence represented a threat to the stability that she and Leah had built. At the same time, she couldn't deny the sincerity in his gestures and words. Eduardo really seemed to want to be part of Leah's life, but he did so discreetly, without imposing his presence. One day, during one of these visits, Eduardo shared a bit more about his past. He told how he had lost his wife years before and how that had left him emotionally destroyed. He explained that after her death, he distanced himself from Hugo, who was never an easy son to deal with. "I lost the opportunity to be a good father, Olivia," he confessed with teary eyes. "But I don't want to lose the chance to be a present grandfather for Leah. I know it's too late to correct all the mistakes I made, but maybe there's still time to do the right thing." These words touched Olivia in a way she didn't expect. She herself knew what it was like to live with regrets and losses. The years had hardened her, but also made her sensitive to others' pain. She began to see Eduardo not as a threat, but as a man trying to find redemption, in the same way she had done by taking care of Leah. Even so, the fear of losing the girl kept her constantly alert. The relationship between the three began to transform. Eduardo was no longer seen as an intruder, but as someone who was slowly becoming part of their lives. Leah, although still attached to Olivia, began to accept Eduardo's presence more naturally. On a particularly sunny day, Eduardo suggested a trip to the city park. He brought a picnic basket full of treats that delighted Leah. Seeing her running across the lawn with a smile on her face, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Maybe, after all, there was room in their lives for this new figure. During the picnic, Eduardo proposed something that surprised Olivia. "I know you still have doubts about me, and I respect that," he said as he watched Leah play with the flowers. "But what if we start slowly? You can be present all the time, no pressure. We can spend some afternoons together, so Leah gets used to me, and so you can see that my intentions are sincere." Olivia remained silent for a few seconds, considering the proposal. On one hand, she feared that this approach could open space for Eduardo to claim custody of Leah in the future. On the other hand, the girl had the right to know her story, her origin. "I still need time to think about this," Olivia replied with a cautious tone, "but I can consider taking small steps in that direction." Eduardo accepted the answer with a discreet smile, aware that he had made some progress. He knew that to gain Olivia's trust, he would need to be patient and prove through his actions that he was there to help, not to hinder. In the following days, Olivia found herself struggling with conflicting emotions. It was clear that Eduardo didn't want to replace her role in Leah's life, but the shadow of the past and the fear of losing the girl prevented her from relaxing completely. However, as the meetings continued, she began to realize that Leah liked having Eduardo around. The girl laughed at his jokes, ran towards him, and little by little began to call him Grandpa. This simple gesture broke something inside Olivia, not in a negative way, but as a release of repressed feelings. Seeing that Leah was happy, surrounded by people who loved her, gave Olivia the courage to lower her defenses a little more. Gradually, a new routine began to establish itself. Eduardo started to be part of some important moments, such as visits to Leah's school and the afternoons when the girl drew and asked for her grandfather's opinion. Olivia still had her reservations, but she was learning to trust him, albeit cautiously. She knew that allowing this new dynamic was a risky bet, but she also knew that love is not limited to a single form or a single person. Over time, Olivia's initial resistance began to dissipate. She still had doubts, but recognized that Leah's well-being was benefiting from this new family configuration. Deep down, perhaps she was learning that healing wounds involved accepting support from others and believing that sometimes life offers us second chances, even in the most unlikely situations. Chapter 8. Love Reborn. As Olivia adapted to Eduardo's growing presence in their lives, something unexpected began to happen. An emotional connection began to form between them. It wasn't just a matter of coexistence or sharing responsibilities. There was something deeper, a bond that seemed to strengthen with each new encounter, with each sincere conversation. Eduardo, with his patient and understanding manner, showed Olivia a facet of life that she had long forgotten. He made her laugh at simple things, brought stories from the past that awakened a dormant nostalgia, and above all, reminded her that she was still a woman, not just a mother dedicated to Leah. Olivia, in turn, was surprised to realize that, after so long living defensively, she was still capable of opening herself to feelings of affection and companionship. There was something about Eduardo that comforted her, a kind of silent security that he conveyed just by his presence. It wasn't like the passionate love she had felt in the past, but a kind of serene, mature connection, based on mutual understanding and respect. Perhaps it was the result of the tortuous paths they both had traveled in life. He dealing with the loss of his wife and the distance from his son. She facing betrayals and challenges to raise Leah alone. On one of those quiet days while Leah played in the backyard, Eduardo and Olivia sat side by side on the porch. The sun was setting, tinting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. On the contrary, there was a rare peace in that shared moment. It was Eduardo who broke the silence first. "You know, Olivia, I never thought life would bring me here, back to this place where everything seems to make sense again. For so long I felt lost, without purpose. But meeting Leah and meeting you gave me something I didn't know I needed. A new beginning." Olivia, who wasn't used to hearing such sincere words, didn't know what to say for a moment. Life had taught her to distrust, to protect herself from disappointments. But there was something about Eduardo that made her lower her guard, at least a little. "I didn't expect any of this either, Eduardo. When I found Leah, I thought I was just doing what was right. But she changed everything for me, gave me a reason to move forward, even when it seemed there was no more hope." That exchange of words wasn't just a conversation. It was a mutual recognition of what they were building together, even without having planned it. The connection that was growing between them wasn't based on illusions or unrealistic expectations, but on the acceptance of the scars that each carried and the willingness to heal them, together. Eduardo began to be even more present, now with Olivia's full acceptance. He became the grandfather that Leah never had, participating in school events, helping with homework, and occasionally spoiling the girl with gifts that filled her eyes with joy. Life, which once seemed so hard and full of obstacles for Olivia, was becoming lighter, more colorful. Over time, Olivia realized that what she felt for Eduardo wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, a form of love that she hadn't experienced before, a love that didn't demand promises or sacrifices, but that was born from the simple fact of being present for each other. There was something incredibly comforting in knowing that, after so many years of struggles and losses, she could still experience the most beautiful side of life. But, as in any journey of rediscovery, fears were still present. Olivia feared that if she gave herself completely to this new feeling, she would end up suffering again. And Eduardo, as much as he was willing to be by their side, also carried his insecurities. However, both knew it was worth trying, even if the future was uncertain. With each new day, the bond between them strengthened, and Leah's presence only reinforced the union of the small family they were forming. It no longer mattered how it all had started, with traumas and abandonments. What really mattered was that, together, they were creating a new chapter, full of love, understanding, and second chances. 110. História Emocionantes Inglês. Alice and her son Lucas climbed the steps to their cozy home, the sun setting gently on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sidewalk. Carrying the shopping bags, she felt the familiar comfort of being back home. With keys in hand, Alice juggled trying to find the right one, while Lucas, always impatient, grabbed the doorknob and turned it, expecting it to be locked as usual. To his surprise, the door opened easily. Alice frowned in confusion. Strange, she muttered to herself, thinking that Miguel, her husband, must have come home early. After placing the groceries on the kitchen counter, Alice decided she deserved a few moments to relax in the living room before starting to prepare dinner. However, as she entered the room, her steps faltered. There, on the couch, was Miguel, but he wasn't alone. Beside him, a woman Alice had never seen before laughed softly, as if they shared an intimate secret. Alice's heart raced, and her mind began to spin. "Excuse me," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the shock. "What's going on here?" The unknown woman looked up, an amused smile on her lips, but there was an arrogance in it that Alice didn't like. Miguel, however, remained seated, his expression unreadable. A storm of emotions was forming inside Alice, her heart beating uncontrollably as she desperately waited for an explanation. Finally, Miguel stood up, his face now serious. "Alice, this is my girlfriend, Mariana. Mariana, this is my soon-to-be ex-wife, Alice," he said, with a calmness devoid of any emotion. Alice's mind was spinning, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. "Wait, I don't understand," she began, her voice trembling with disbelief and pain. "You brought your girlfriend to our house?" Miguel interrupted abruptly. "My house, Alice. It's my house. And you see, I tried to make our marriage work, but I clearly failed. We have to move on." His words hit her like a physical blow, and the shock of his betrayal was devastating, as painful as losing a loved one. Alice stood paralyzed, her eyes fixed on Miguel, as he introduced Mariana with a casualness that deeply hurt her. "How long has this been going on?" she managed to ask, her voice a mixture of anger and sadness. Miguel sighed heavily, his expression souring as he faced Alice's questioning. "Alice, this is neither the time nor the place to discuss this," he said, trying to end the conversation with disdain. "Who is she, and how can you stand there?" Alice insisted, her voice faltering with emotion. Mariana opened her mouth to respond, but Miguel interrupted her. He turned to Mariana, his hands holding her waist while staring fixedly at Alice. "Alice, you had your chance. You didn't meet my expectations," he declared bluntly. "Mariana can give me what I need." The harshness of his words was like a slap in the face to Alice, leaving her reeling with cold rejection, as if the years together meant nothing. "I don't understand, Miguel. After all these years together, how can you say this? What am I supposed to tell Lucas?" Alice asked, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. Miguel's response was cold and disdainful. "Tell him whatever you think is best. I'm not his father, Alice. I never was, and he will never be my son." Alice stood there sobbing softly, her head hanging in despair. She knew there was no going back. Without saying a word, she turned, took Lucas's hand, and went to the room they shared. "Go get your things, Lucas. We need to leave." "Where are we going, Mommy?" Lucas asked, trying to smile, but with tears in his eyes. Alice swallowed hard, avoiding her son's innocent gaze. "We'll be fine, honey. Just go get your things." As soon as she heard the soft click of the door closing, Alice fell to the floor. Everything seemed like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. She remembered how it all began, how hard it was to believe in another love after the death of her first husband, how Miguel entered her life and brought with him the promise of happiness. She remembered their first date when he made her laugh for the first time in a year and a half. His charm was undeniable, and the way he held her hand made her feel safe and at home again. But now, the man she believed loved her was there, holding another woman in his arms. laughing as if everything they had shared was a lie. Rachel sighed, her pain turning into bitter resentment. With a strength she didn't know she had, she stormed into the room, grabbed a suitcase, and began throwing Lucas's clothes inside, her hands trembling with anger and sadness. She couldn't believe she had wasted so many years on Miguel's lies and deceptions. As she packed the clothes, her mind raced with all the signs she had ignored over the years. Anger and pain overflowed, manifesting in the fierce way she crammed clothes into the suitcase, as if trying to squeeze all the betrayal into each piece. Just as she was about to zip up the suitcase, a small voice interrupted her tumultuous thoughts. "Mommy?" Lucas's hesitant voice broke through her fury, and she turned to see her son standing in the doorway with a suitcase hanging from his shoulder and another beside him. "It's okay, baby. I'm ready." They left the house, and Alice needed all her willpower not to look back. As she drove through the city streets, Alice tried to stay calm, pointing out other houses, trying to distract him. "Remember the house I told you your grandfather left us? That's where we're going." Lucas nodded, trying to be strong, but she could see the sadness in his eyes. When they finally arrived at the old house she had inherited, Alice knew it wasn't much, but it would be enough to start over. The house was bigger than it looked from the outside, but it was in terrible condition. As she entered, Alice felt the weight of the task ahead of them. "Well, it looks like we have a lot of work ahead of us," she said, trying to sound optimistic. Lucas nodded, still looking around, but with a determined expression. "Let me check the attic to see what we can use up there. There must be a vacuum cleaner somewhere." Alice watched him climb the stairs, her heart tightening at the idea that they were now alone. Shortly after, Lucas returned, and together they began to clean the house from top to bottom. The dust and dirt disappeared, revealing the true beauty of the place. The wooden floor that was once dusty now shone, as did the windows. As they worked, the house began to transform from a gloomy place into a true home. Finally, after hours of hard work, they finished cleaning. Alice looked at her son and smiled. "You know, we make a great team," she said, but soon noticed the tiredness in Lucas's eyes and knew they still had a long way to go. Determined to make that place a home, Alice remembered seeing some wooden boards in the yard and decided to use them as firewood, but when she tried to break them, she realized it would be difficult. "Why don't we go see if we can get an axe from our neighbors?" she suggested, trying to keep her voice steady and hide her concern. Lucas accompanied her to the house next door, which seemed as quiet as theirs. Alice knocked on the door, hoping someone would answer. After a few moments, an elderly woman opened the door, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked gently. Alice explained the situation, and, to her surprise, the woman invited them in to warm up. Inside the house, Alice felt the warmth of the fireplace and the comforting aroma of fresh bread. The woman, who introduced herself as Clara, offered them tea and hot chocolate. "I'm Alice, and this is my son Lucas," she said, still a bit cautious. Clara smiled, nodding. "I understand you're careful, but you don't need to worry. I don't bite." Alice's cheeks flushed, but Clara seemed to understand her hesitation. As they talked, Alice began to relax, feeling an unexpected connection with this woman, who until recently was a stranger. When Clara offered Alice and Lucas a room to spend the night, Alice hesitated, but ended up accepting. The night was cold, and she didn't want to subject Lucas to the discomfort of the empty house. Clara showed them 2 rooms next to each other, and Alice quickly settled Lucas before heading to her own room. But that night, she couldn't sleep. The tears finally fell, a mixture of relief and sadness, as she silently thanked Clara for her kindness. The next morning, Alice met Gabriel, Clara's son, who was there to help with repairs to the house. Gabriel was tall, with hard features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through her. Initially, Alice mistook him for a handyman, but soon discovered he was a firefighter and the person who would take care of the repairs. Despite his somewhat gruff attitude, Alice realized that Gabriel was someone she could trust. When Clara offered Alice and Lucas a room to spend the night, Alice hesitated for a moment, still trying to process how quickly her life had changed. She had never liked depending on other people, but that night, something inside her broke. She knew she couldn't go back to the empty and cold house. And as much as she tried to keep up appearances, Lucas needed warmth and security, things that Clara's house seemed to have in abundance. I don't know if we should bother you like this, Alice began, but Clara interrupted with a gentle gesture. Oh, it's no bother at all. Believe me, dear, it's not safe for you to go back to that dark house tonight. Here it's warm and safe, and tomorrow we can think about how to help you fix what needs to be done. Alice's resistance crumbled in the face of Clara's gentle insistence. All right, Alice finally said, feeling a wave of relief mixed with shame for having to accept help from a stranger. Thank you, Clara. I really appreciate it. Clara smiled, satisfied, and led Alice and Lucas upstairs to two adjoining rooms. Clara opened the door to one of the rooms, revealing a soft bed and an inviting blanket. Alice watched Lucas walk slowly to the bed, still half dazed by everything that had happened. He flopped onto the bed, too exhausted to speak, and Alice covered him with the blanket. Before she could say goodnight, Lucas was already asleep, his small body finally relaxing after the long and difficult day. Alice turned to Clara, who was patiently waiting at the door. You're welcome to share a room with Lucas if you want, Clara said, her voice soft and understanding. I know how hard it can be for a mother to sleep alone after a day like today. Alice smiled, feeling deep gratitude for this woman she barely knew. Thank you, Clara, she said, accepting the offer. I think I'll do that. The hours passed slowly as Alice tried to find some rest. She couldn't push away the thoughts hammering in her mind. Miguel's face, the cruel words he had said, and the overwhelming feeling of betrayal. When she finally fell asleep, tears were silently rolling down her face, mixing gratitude for Clara with the shock and pain that Miguel had caused her. The next morning, Alice was awakened by the soft sounds of Clara working in the kitchen. Lucas was still sleeping deeply, so Alice quietly descended the stairs, following the comforting aroma of fresh coffee and baked bread. As she entered the kitchen, she saw Clara at the window, looking out, with an expression that mixed nostalgia and tranquility. Good morning, said Alice, trying to sound more cheerful than she felt. Clara turned, smiling. Good morning, dear. Sit down. I made coffee and fresh bread. I know it's not much, but it's a start. Alice thanked her and sat at the table, taking a sip of coffee and feeling the warmth of the drink fill a bit of the emptiness she felt. The tranquility of the morning contrasted with the internal turmoil she still faced, but there was something comforting about Clara's presence, who seemed to understand without needing many words. As they had breakfast, Clara began to talk about her son, Raphael, who was a firefighter and was coming to help with the repairs to Alice's house. He's a good boy, Clara said, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. He's always liked helping others. I think he got that from his father. Alice smiled, trying to imagine what it would be like to meet Raphael. The last thing she wanted was to depend on someone else, but she knew she couldn't do everything alone. I'm very grateful, Clara. I don't know what I would do without your help. Don't worry about it, dear. We all need help at some point in life. And today, I'm here for you. Tomorrow, who knows? It might be you helping someone. As they talked, Alice began to realize that Clara was more than just a helpful neighbor. There was a wisdom and kindness in her that went beyond immediate understanding. And as Clara talked about her life, Alice began to feel that maybe this unexpected change had a greater purpose. Later that morning, as Clara prepared more bread and Alice helped set the table, a firm knock sounded at the door. Clara smiled, knowing exactly who it was. Must be Raphael, she said, walking to the door to open it. Raphael entered, bringing with him a gust of cold winter air. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a serious expression, but his eyes, a deep blue, softened when he saw his mother. Good morning, Mom, he said, leaning in to kiss her forehead. When his eyes fell on Alice, he studied her with a look that seemed to read her soul. You must be Alice, he said, extending his hand. Nice to meet you. My mother has told me a lot about you. Alice shook his hand, feeling the strength and security that emanated from him. Nice to meet you, Raphael, and thank you for coming to help. Raphael nodded. Let's take a look at the house and see what needs to be done. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. As the three of them went out and walked to Alice's house, Raphael began to inspect the place with a critical eye. He noticed the small repairs that needed to be done, like the broken tiles on the roof and the clogged gutter. But he also noticed something Alice hadn't: a silent strength and resilience in the structure of the house itself. "This house has character," Raphael said, with a hint of admiration in his voice. "It's as if it's been waiting for you." Alice looked at the house with new eyes. It was old, yes, but there was something special about it, something she hadn't been able to perceive before. It was as if, somehow, the house was keeping a secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Raphael started working immediately, cleaning the gutters and repairing the tiles. Alice tried to help, but he insisted that she rest and leave the heavy work to him. While he worked, Clara and Alice talked in the kitchen, exchanging stories and recipes, and little by little, Alice began to feel that this place could really be a home. By the end of the day, the house was already starting to look different. Raphael's repairs had made a noticeable difference, and the atmosphere in the house began to change. The cold that once seemed to permeate every wall was replaced by a feeling of warmth and coziness. When Raphael finished his work, he returned to Clara's house with Alice and Lucas, where they were greeted by a warm and comforting dinner. During dinner, Lucas, who had been shy at first, began to open up, telling Raphael about his toys and his adventures at school. Raphael listened attentively, and Alice noticed the ease with which he connected with her son. There was a gentleness in Raphael that surprised her, and as she watched him interact with Lucas, she realized that he was very different from Miguel. Miguel had always been distant with Lucas, treating him more as a nuisance than as a child with needs and feelings. Raphael, on the other hand, seemed genuinely interested in everything Lucas had to say, as if every word was important. This difference made Alice feel both grateful and sad. Grateful for having found people like Clara and Raphael, but sad to realize how much she and Lucas had lost by Miguel's side. As the night progressed, Alice began to relax, feeling more at peace than at any other time since everything had changed. She knew she still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe she could find a way to move forward. There was something about Raphael. Maybe it was his reassuring presence, or maybe it was the simple fact that he was there, helping without expecting anything in return, that made her feel she wasn't alone. In the days that followed, Raphael continued to help with the repairs, and Alice began to feel that something was changing inside her. The trauma and pain that Miguel had caused her began to be replaced by a sense of hope. And the more time she spent with Raphael, the more she felt attracted to him. It wasn't just a physical attraction, although she couldn't deny that he was an attractive man. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. As they worked together on the house, Alice and Raphael began to share more about their lives. She told him about the death of her first husband, about how she had struggled to move on, and about how Miguel had entered her life at a moment of vulnerability. Raphael listened attentively without judging, just offering a friendly shoulder. And as she spoke, Alice realized she was opening up in a way she hadn't done in years. Raphael, in turn, told Alice about his life as a firefighter, about the things he had seen and experienced, and about how his father's death had changed his life forever. He talked about the responsibility of taking care of his mother and how, despite everything, he always found strength in helping others. As he spoke, Alice saw in Raphael a kindred soul, someone who had gone through deep pain but still found strength and purpose in helping others. One night, after a long day of work, Raphael and Alice were sitting on Clara's porch, watching the stars. Lucas was already asleep, and Clara had retired to her room, leaving the two alone. The silence between them was comfortable, as if they didn't need words to understand each other. "I know it's still early," Raphael said, finally breaking the silence, "but I feel there's something between us, Alice. Something that goes beyond anything I've ever experienced." Alice felt her heart race, but at the same time, there was peace in his words. She knew she felt something for Raphael, too, something that grew every day. "I feel the same, Raphael," she said, turning to look into his eyes. "But I'm still trying to understand everything that happened. I don't want to rush." Raphael nodded, understanding perfectly. "I don't want to pressure you, Alice. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, whatever time you need." Alice smiled, feeling a wave of emotion. Thank you, Raphael. I'm here for you too. That night, under the soft glow of the stars, something changed between them. It wasn't a hasty or impetuous romance, but something built on trust, respect, and deep understanding. They knew they still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, Alice felt she was exactly where she should be. Days turned into weeks, and the relationship between Alice and Raphael blossomed. They not only shared the work of rebuilding the house, but also the small moments of everyday life. Breakfast in Clara's kitchen, conversations under the stars, and shared laughter as they watched Lucas play in the yard. Every moment together was a slow and steady building of something deeper. Lucas also flourished under the warmth and safety of the new environment. He and Raphael formed a strong bond, and Alice watched with joy as the relationship between them grew. Lucas, who before seemed so lost and confused, was now full of energy and curiosity. He finally had someone who not only listened to him, but also understood and appreciated him. Then, one day, while Alice was in the attic, cleaning and organizing things, she found something that would change her life forever. It was an old suitcase, covered in dust, hidden in a corner. When she opened it, she found a series of carefully organized files and an envelope addressed to her. Her heart raced when she recognized her father's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Alice unfolded the letter and began to read. Her father's words, written so many years ago, seemed to traverse time and space to reach her at that moment. He spoke of how he always wanted to give her more than he was able to during his life, and how he had made small investments, hoping that one day it might help her. Alice couldn't hold back the tears as she read. Her father, who had always struggled so hard to take care of her, had left a legacy that now, years after his death, was about to change everything. At the end of the letter, there was a phone number and instructions to contact a certain Mr. Thompson, who would help her access these investments. With her heart racing, Alice called the number, and what she heard left her speechless. She was a millionaire, thanks to her father's investments. Alice could hardly believe what she had just heard. Mr. Thompson's words still echoed in her mind. She was a millionaire. It was hard to process, especially after the last few months of uncertainty and suffering. For a moment, she sat in the attic, the envelope still in her hands, as tears ran freely down her face. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, but also of deep emotion, a mixture of happiness and sadness, knowing that her father, even after death, continued to take care of her. After a few minutes, Alice composed herself and ran down the stairs. She needed to tell Raphael. She needed to share this news that suddenly changed everything. As she descended, her mind began to think of all the ways this money could help, not just her and Lucas, but so many other people. She thought of Clara, who had welcomed her when she needed it most, and of Raphael, who had become a vital part of her life and her son's life. When she reached the living room, she found Raphael and Clara in the kitchen, talking quietly as they prepared dinner. The sight of them together, laughing and working in harmony, warmed her heart. For a moment she stood in the doorway, just watching them, feeling more connected to these two people than she ever imagined. "Raphael," she called, her voice a little shaky with emotion. He turned to look at her, immediately noticing that something was different. "Are you okay, Alice?" he asked, his tone concerned as he noticed the expression on her face. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice still unsteady. "You won't believe what I just found out." Raphael and Clara exchanged a brief look before following Alice to the living room, where she sat on the couch, still holding the envelope with her father's letter. She explained everything to them: the letter, her father's investments, and the fact that she was now a millionaire. As she spoke, the incredulity on Raphael and Clara's faces was replaced by a silent and contained joy. "This is amazing, Alice," Raphael finally said, after she finished speaking. "I can hardly believe it. This changes everything, doesn't it?" Alice nodded, still feeling the weight of what this new reality meant. "Yes, it changes everything. But the most important thing is that now we can do much more than just survive. We can help other people. We can start over." Clara smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. Your father was a wise man, Alice. He knew this moment would come, and he prepared everything to ensure you had what you needed when the time was right. Alice held Clara and Raphael's hands, feeling the deep connection they shared. I want to help you too, she said, determined. You were my anchor in this difficult time, and I want to give back. Raphael shook his head, smiling softly. Alice, you don't owe us anything. We helped because we wanted to, because we care about you and Lucas. But if there's something you really want to do, we're here for that. They spent the rest of the night discussing plans, ideas, and dreams. Alice decided that the first thing to do would be to renovate the house she had inherited, turning it into a home for her and Lucas. Raphael offered to help with the renovation, ensuring that everything would be done with care and attention. Clara, in turn, was already thinking about how she could contribute, suggesting ways to improve the garden and bring more life to the environment. In the days that followed, Alice began to take the necessary steps to access the funds left by her father. With Mr. Thompson's help, she managed to transfer the money to an account in her name and began making preparations for the house renovation. It was a long process, but with each step, Alice felt she was moving in the right direction. As the weeks passed, Alice's house began to transform. Raphael worked tirelessly, repairing walls, replacing the roof, and restoring the wooden floor that had lost its shine over the years. Clara and Lucas helped where they could, painting walls and planting flowers in the garden. Alice was involved in every detail, feeling more connected to that house than ever before. And as the house took shape, something even deeper began to happen. The relationship between Alice and Raphael strengthened every day. It wasn't just the joint work that brought them closer, but the way they began to depend on each other for emotional support and to face the challenges that arose. Raphael was always by Alice's side, offering a friendly shoulder when she needed it, and sharing with her his own fears and hopes. One night, after a long day of work, Alice and Raphael were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was fresh and full of the scent of flowers that Clara and Lucas had planted. Have you thought about what you're going to do after the house is finished? Raphael asked, breaking the silence. Alice smiled, thinking about the possibilities the future now offered. I have some ideas, she said. I want to write again. I had stopped, but I feel like I can finally focus on it now. Raphael nodded, the respect for her evident in his eyes. You have so much talent, Alice. It would be a shame not to share it with the world. I also want to help other people, she continued. Maybe create a space here in the house to offer support to other women who have gone through difficult situations, like a refuge where they can feel safe and rebuild their lives, just as I'm doing. Raphael looked at her with admiration. That's a wonderful idea, Alice. You have a big heart. I know you'll make a difference in many people's lives. Alice felt a wave of emotion hearing his words. I wouldn't have made it this far without you and Clara. Raphael, you're my family now. He reached out and held her hand, squeezing it affectionately. And we'll always be here for you, Alice. Always. Time continued to pass, and the house renovation was finally completed. The place, which once seemed gloomy and abandoned, was now full of life and warmth. Each room had been transformed, reflecting the love and care that had been invested in it. The garden flourished, and the house was filled with natural light that entered through the large, clean windows. On the day the renovation was officially completed, Alice organized a small dinner to celebrate with Clara, Raphael, and Lucas. As they sat at the table, surrounded by the welcoming environment they had created together, Alice realized how much her life had changed since the day she arrived at that place. Clara raised her wine glass and made a toast. To new beginnings, she said, smiling at everyone around the table. May this house be a place of love, peace, and happiness for all of us. To new beginnings, everyone repeated, raising their glasses and toasting. That night, after everyone had retired, Alice and Raphael sat on the couch, the fire crackling softly in the fireplace. The house was quiet, and the silence was comfortable, a testimony to the peace that now filled their hearts. Raphael turned to Alice, holding her hand. Alice, I need to tell you something, he began, his voice low and serious. I don't know how to say this, but I love you. Alice looked at him, her heart beating faster. She had known, in her heart, that she loved him too. But hearing these words from Raphael, everything seemed to finally fall into place. "I love you too, Raphael," she replied, feeling a deep joy take over her being. "You helped me find my way back, showed me that it's possible to love and be loved again." They moved closer, their lips meeting in a soft kiss full of promises. It was the beginning of something new, something built on trust, respect, and deep love. They knew the future would still bring challenges, but they also knew they would be together to face them. In the months that followed, Alice began to turn her plans into reality. With Raphael and Clara's help, she created a small refuge in the house, where other women could find shelter and support. The space soon became a place of hope, where stories of pain turned into stories of overcoming. Lucas flourished more and more in his new home, and his bond with Raphael strengthened every day. For Alice, seeing her son happy and secure was the greatest reward of all. She knew she had found not just a house, but a home, where she and Lucas could grow and prosper. Alice also returned to writing, finding in words a way to express everything she had lived and learned. Her books began to gain recognition, and soon she became a respected author, whose stories inspired other people to find strength and hope in difficult times. Time passed, and life in the small house settled into a quiet and happy rhythm. Alice, Raphael, Lucas, and Clara formed a united family, facing challenges together and celebrating the joys of everyday life. The love that had grown between Alice and Raphael only strengthened, and they knew they were destined to spend the rest of their lives together. On a sunny spring afternoon, as Alice walked through the garden beside Raphael, she paused for a moment to observe the flowers blooming around her. She turned to Raphael, smiling, and said, "I couldn't be happier. This is the home I've always dreamed of having, and I'm so grateful to have you by my side." Raphael smiled back, holding her hand firmly. "Me too, Alice. You are my home, wherever you are, and I promise I'll always be here, for you and for Lucas, no matter what happens." They continued to walk through the garden, hand in hand, knowing that the future was bright and full of possibilities. Alice knew she had found the happiness she had sought for so long, and that now, finally, she was exactly where she should be, in a home full of love, with the people who mattered most. And so, as the sun slowly set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Alice and Raphael began to dream together about the next chapters of their lives. They knew that, together, they could face anything, because they had found what really mattered: love, family, and the hope of a new beginning.